Good morning. Welcome to this month's meeting of the Rother District Council Planning Committee. I am Councillor Brian Drayson, Chairman of the committee. The committee is required to consider all applications that come before it against national and local planning policies. Where these policies appear to conflict with each other, the members are required to use their personal knowledge and judgment to come to a decision for the benefit of the district as a whole. It should be noted that the Planning Committee is not a public meeting, but a meeting that the public may attend. Rother District Council has a public speaking scheme which allows members of the public and others to address the committee on a particular application. Full details are available on the RDC website. For those in the chamber this morning, there is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so in the event of an alarm, all persons in the chamber are asked to leave by the nearest fire exit and reassemble outside in the front car park. It is important that you remain there long enough to be accounted for. We are joined in the chamber this morning by the following officers: Kemi Arifi-Viemi, the Development Manager; I panic every time. Kirsty Cameron, Legal Advisor; Edwin Cork, Planning Officer; Michael Vladanu, Planning Officer; and Ruben Hayward, another Planning Officer. And helping with the meeting itself, we have two officers from Democratic Services: Julie Hollands, the Committee Secretary, and Eleanor Drew, who is looking after our webcast. That's it. On to the agenda. A reminder, please, to members in the chamber to make sure you turn your microphones on before speaking, and almost more importantly, turn it off when you have finished. At some recent meetings, people in the public gallery have found it difficult to hear what is being said. And when I started this morning, I already had somebody at the back cupping their ear to hear what I said, which is why my volume went up slightly. The loudspeakers appear to be working correctly, but it will help if members make every effort to speak clearly and directly into their microphones. Right, agenda item 1, minutes. Do I have your authority to sign the minutes of the meeting of the Planning Committee held on the 30th of May as a correct record of the proceedings? Thank you. Thank you. Item 2, apologies for absence and substitutes. Julie.
So we have apologies from Councillors Bayliss, Mrs Cook, Gordon and Groner. Councillor Field is standing in as substitute for Councillor Mrs Cook, and Councillor John Barnes is standing in as substitute for Councillor Groner.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, any additional agenda items?
No, there's none.
And 4, any withdrawn applications?
No, there's none.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, to receive any disclosures by members of disclosable pecuniary interests and other registrable and non-registrable interests in matters on the agenda. The nature of any such interest and details of any dispensations obtained. Also, if any member considers themselves predetermined on any matter coming before the committee today, they should declare it and leave the chamber at the appropriate time. I will start the ball rolling by declaring a predetermination, as I did last time on agenda item 8, as a ward member for Bexhill-Quhurst, and I originally called this in, so I will be handing over to the Vice Chair for that and leaving the chamber. Are there any others, please? Councillor Field.
Thank you. Item 9 is in my ward. I have in the past spoken against this particular development. I don't think this application is the same as that, although it is attached to it. So what I shall do is I shall say my piece as ward member and then leave.
Thank you. Any others? So simple, Councillor Field, but also created a problem. One moment. Thank you, Councillor Field. Right, there's no other. You're reminded to repeat that before that, when that agenda item comes on, as will I. Item 6, the Planning Applications Index. The final page of this shows the applications being considered today. Just to let you know, because of what I've said previously, I'm changing the order of the agenda so that I can hand over to the Vice Chairman at an appropriate time and leave the meeting in good time to fulfil an important family commitment. So we will deal with agenda item 7, on which we have public speakers, then agenda item 9, then I will hand over to the Chair, to Councillor Stanger, to deal with items 8 and 10. The Planning Committee members understand that planning matters can be very emotive, especially for those directly affected by the outcome. Nevertheless, I would ask everyone within the chamber to remain calm and courteous throughout the meeting. Thank you. Agenda item 7, application RR 2022-1118P, Cottage Lane, development adjacent to Westfield. Proposal is an outline for up to 20 dwellings with new access from Cottage Lane. This was called in by a ward councillor for decision by the committee rather than through delegation, and the recommendation is that it be resolved to grant outline planning delegated subject to the provisos shown on page 6 of the agenda. The officer in this case is Edwin Cork. If you please, Ed.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Members visited site and surrounding area on Tuesday. An update sheet, together with additional comments submitted by the Parish Council, were circulated yesterday, I believe. The application relates to an approximately 1.18 hectare parcel of unallocated land which lies to the north of the village on the eastern side of Cottage Lane, which is a historic routeway. It forms the southwestern part of a larger parcel of land which extends up to Mill Lane to the northeast. When the application was originally submitted, the site and adjoining land to the northeast were used for Christmas tree cultivation and had been for over 20 years. The land has since been cleared of trees. There's an aerial photograph. I've just put the cursor over the on there. So site, if you can see, is just in this area here, and you can see the former Christmas trees where my cursor is. Site is located outside of, but immediately adjoins the development boundary for Westfield. And the site here is where the wording Wes 2 is. That's effectively where the site is. So, and it runs down to the development boundary to the south below that. It's in the countryside and is also within the High Weald National Landscape. The site is not in an isolated location, as it is adjacent to existing residential properties to the south, west and north, including dwellings in Fernley Close, along Cottage Lane and in Mill Close. Outline planning permission is sought for the erection of up to 20 dwellings on the land, with a policy-compliant 40% affordable housing proposed. At this stage, access is the only matter for which approval is sought, and this is proposed to be from Cottage Lane, opposite the shared driveway serving Turner's Cottage and Ash Cottage. The application is accompanied by a site layout plan, which is on the screen now, and that shows a 20-unit housing scheme comprising a mix of 2, 3 and 4-bedroom dwellings. This is an illustrative site layout plan only. If outline planning permission is granted, the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale of the housing development are matters that will be detailed and secured at reserved matter stage. 2 off-site parcels of land are proposed for biodiversity net gain. One of these is the adjoining land to the north-east, and the other is located adjacent to Cottage Lane, some 2.4 kilometres to the northwest of the site. The committee report sets out the main issues to consider in determining whether outline planning permission should be granted. These include...
One moment. Okay. Is your, Councillor Ganley, is your headphone, they're working, yes? Oh. For those watching online, there's an internal hearing system, and it seems to have gone down at the moment. Members who use it are struggling to hear. We'll be resuming when we've sorted it. It's probably in the system.
Hello.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. It appears that the system's not working.
Chairman, I'll use my earphones.
Okay. And we will all speak even louder. Yeah. None of that. No. The system isn't working. Right. No, sorry about that. Sorry for the interruption. Back to you, Mr. Court.
Okay, so we just set out the site and the proposal. So we're then on to, the committee report sets out the main issues to consider in determining whether outline planning permission should be granted. These include the principal residential development in its countryside location, whether the site is a sustainable location for new housing, and impact of the proposal on the character and appearance of the area, having particular regard to the High Weald national landscape. In relation to the principle of development, the site is located in the countryside, where schemes such as this are not normally permitted, as development plan policies seek to focus new development within defined settlement boundaries. However, the Council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing. This means that the policy restrictions relating to development boundaries are presently out of date. As a consequence, this planning application falls to be considered in the context of paragraph 11D of the National Planning Policy Framework, which means granting planning permission unless the applications of policies in a National Planning Policy Framework that protect areas or assets of particular importance, provides a clear reason for refusing the development proposed, or any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in the framework taken as a whole. This does not mean that housing schemes which are unacceptable on sound planning grounds must now be allowed. However, it does add weight to the benefits that a potential additional source of housing supply would bring when determining the planning balance. Turning to the issue of whether the site is in a sustainable location, it is located at the edge of the settlement, approximately 500 metres to the north of the village centre. Access to the housing development would be from Cottage Lane, which is subject to a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit in this location. The site is within walking distance of the services and bus stops in the village. However, some sections of Cottage Lane are without a footway, function as a shared surface. This is acknowledged by the Highway Authority, who have advised that the site is not ideally located from an accessibility perspective. Nonetheless, given the relatively close proximity of the site to the village centre, the proposal could not be refused on accessibility grounds. This is subject to the provision of a 40-metre length, 2-metre wide footway to the south of the access, with the connection to the nearby public footpath 27, upgrading footpath Westfield 28 between Cottage Lane and Main Road, upgrading of the bus stops either side of Main Road near Westfield Surgery, and the provision of an associated pedestrian crossing point. These off-site works can be secured by Section 106 agreements. In relation to the impact of the proposal on the character and appearance of the area, it is considered that a sensitive landscape-led development would provide an opportunity to conserve and enhance the landscape and scenic beauty of the Highwood National Landscape in this location. The county landscape architect has advised that the site is more closely related to village edge and character than the wider Highwood National Landscape, and this is evident by the close proximity of nearby residential properties. Moreover, until recently, the site was used for Christmas tree cultivation, which was not typical of the Highwood National Landscape. The expectation is that at a reserve matter stage, the design principles of Building for a Healthy Life and the Highwood Housing Design Guide would be followed to ensure the development reflects the intrinsic Highwood character and is embedded with a true sense of place. A number of other matters are addressed in the committee report, including housing mix, amenities of neighbouring properties, highway and transport impacts, flood risk and drainage, and biodiversity, etc. The proposal is considered to be acceptable in relation to all these matters. With regard to the proposed site access on Cottage Lane, the Highway Authority has confirmed that this is acceptable. In terms of the planning balance, this is not a situation where the impact of the proposal on an area of particular importance, in this case the Highwood National Landscape, provides a clear reason for refusing the development proposed. The so-called tilted balance therefore applies. This means granting permission unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in the framework taken as a whole. As the Council cannot currently just demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing, the provision of up to 20 dwellings, including up to 8 affordable units, would help to significantly boost the supply of housing in a district, which should be afforded substantial weight. There are also other benefits, including some short-term benefits to the construction industry and further economic benefits from the spend of future occupants, which can be given moderate weight in favour of the scheme. The proposal would deliver a minimum 10% biodiversity net gain and would result in upgrades to a public footpath and 2 bus stops near Westfield Surgery. A new pedestrian crossing point on Main Road would also be provided. Money would be generated through the Community Infrastructure Levy. A new homes bonus could be approximately £168,480 over 4 years. Against this, there would be the loss of Grade 3 agricultural land. However, the proposal would not result in a significant development of agricultural land, and nor would it result in the loss of higher quality Grade 1 and Grade 2 land. As such, the loss of Grade 3 agricultural land is given limited weight against the proposal. Taking all the above into account, overall, the adverse impacts of the scheme would not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in the framework taken as a whole. Accordingly, on this occasion, other considerations indicate the decision should be taken otherwise in accordance with the development plan, and therefore is recommended that outline planning permission is granted. This is subject to conditions and the completion of a Section 106 agreement, which would secure off-site highway works and financial contributions, affordable housing provision, custom self-build provision, and off-site land for the biodiversity net gain. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Now that the officer has presented his report to the committee, we now move on to the public speaking section of the meeting. We have 3 speakers registered today. Each speaker will have up to 5 minutes to address the committee based on their previous written submission. New information cannot be introduced at this stage of the proceedings. I will interrupt anyone who is still speaking at the 5-minute mark. And the first speaker, please, if you can come on and introduce yourself, is Jane Clark, Clerk of Westfield Parish Council. Thank you, Jane.
Hello, everyone. As the chairman says, I'm the clerk of Westfield Parish Council, speaking against this application for the Parish Council. Can I start? Yeah. Would you give me the 1 minute warning? Thank you. Okay, this site was not chosen in the DASA less than 5 years ago by officers, deeming it not suitable for residential development due to its location outside the development boundary and it being poorly related to the main core of the village. That statement still stands. A very similar planning application just up the road in Broadoak for 20 houses was turned down at appeal in December 2023, and a new planning application for 15 houses was turned down by Rother officers in February 2024. There is a huge similarity between these two sites. This appealed site, the inspectorate comments, the council only has a 2.79-year supply of deliverable housing. However, the harm to the High Weald provides a clear reason for refusing the development. Therefore, there is no need to refer to the test in paragraph 11D of the framework. The presumption in favour of sustainable development does not apply. So why does this not apply to Cottage Lane, which is so similar? The officer has argued that the damage to the High Weald is acceptable, yet it is outside the development boundary, it's in the countryside. It is a Grade 3 agricultural field. However, in the recent draft local plan, it states that the A&B has no Grade 1 agricultural land, none, and only 2.5% is Grade 2, which means 97.5% of the A&B is Grade 3. So great weight should be given because it is a loss of good quality agricultural land, use of Christmas trees, but also potato farming previously. The report states the proposal would change the character of the landscape from countryside to suburban residential. This development is not near any suburban properties. There are actually only 4 properties along the boundary, and these are semi-rural and rural. Also, Cottage Lane is a historic routeway, and as the officer states, this development would change the character of this route. So what is happening is a rich piece of agricultural land within the OMB is becoming a suburban development and changing the character of the historic routeway to suburban. Attempts have been made to try and mitigate and fit policies to present this site as a sustainable location, but it's not, which is why it was not included in the 2019 DASA. Highways admits that the site is not ideally located, and then lists improvements which cannot be achieved, including installing a 2-metre wide footpath for 40 metres. There is not the space to do this down Cottage Lane. You can't tarmac over the public footpath 28 or upgrade it, as this is land gifted to the community, held in trust by the parish council. Trying to cross at the A28 at this section is an actual death trap. We have recent speed surveys showing cars on average exceeding the speed limit between 36 and 38 miles an hour, especially coming out of the village, and it's a straight piece of road. You cannot upgrade the bus stops, and hopefully the committee would have seen how narrow the footpath is on the A28. Also, this site was cleared and is under investigation with the Forestry Commission, who has said in an email, we can confirm that it appears to the Forestry Commission that an offence has occurred and we are minded to serve a restocking notice. Clearing a site before permission is granted is a material planning consideration. The planning officer admits he cannot tell if this clearance resulted in the injuring or killing of protected species. The pre-clearance survey on the website notes the site should be considered to be of local importance for nature conservation. Further studies were recommended as the site had potential to support grass snakes, slowworms and common lizards, which are protected species. Despite all of this, the officer gives no weight to any of these issues and largely ignores the potential damage to wildlife.
1 minute, Jane.
Finally, over 20 national and local level policies, including 6 from the High Weald Management Plan, are not being complied with. The High Weald not commenting on the site doesn't mean the application doesn't go against these policies, which should be given great weight as set out in policy DEN2. They're not even mentioned in the officer's report. As we said, there is no presumption for development due to the level of harm to the High Weald and the number of objectives going against the High Weald Management Plan as well as Rother's own core policies. There's clear harm to a historic routeway and loss of agriculturally rich land. We do have suitable sites in Westfield for development, as per the DASA agreed less than 5 years ago. The Planning Inspectorate states in the Broadoak appeal the DASA is not out of date, nor is the development plan. It's not a sustainable site. The improvements suggested are not achievable. It's been pre-clear with no confirmation about the level of harm on the local wildlife and was stated as an important site. And furthermore, the National Planning Policy Framework states that great weight should be given to conserving and enhancing the landscape of the A&B. So on balance, this development should be turned down.
Thank you. You've obviously spoken here far too many times.
It is becoming a bit of a reoccurrence.
You've got your timing down to a fine art. Thank you. Are there any questions for the clerk, please? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. You say the site was previously used for potato farming before it became a Christmas tree plantation. About how long ago was that?
I couldn't tell you. You would have to ask the applicant. It was a Christmas tree site, but if you look at the, there was an environmental survey done before the site was cleared that's on the website, and it gives you very clear photographs of the condition of that site.
Thank you. It's easier for me because I'm facing straight on, but could councillors remember, try and not, Jane won't think it's rude if you're not looking at her. Look at her to start, but then face your microphone. No. Oh, no, that's, I think everyone can see you, but it's not everyone can hear what a councillor's saying if they turn away from their microphone to talk to you. Thank you. Any other questions, please? Councillor Barnes.
Chairman, I'm not sure whether I'm directing this question to the right person, but I would welcome the clerks, if the clerk can fill out a little bit of our knowledge of this particular routeway, because the High Weald is preserved not merely because of its aesthetic qualities, but also its historic qualities. And there appears to be some implication in the officer's report that we are likely to find Roman remains, which presumably relate to that route.
I suspect that is probably more a question for the officer. Yeah. Until Jane says she hasn't got a clue. Jane.
All I would say is I know that particular part of Cottage Lane has been untouched. There aren't footpaths down there at all from memory. I'm probably going to get shot if I get this wrong, but from that end, the footpaths are the other side where there is residential development. It is incredibly narrow and it's quite straight as well. It does go down a dip and then around a corner. But that's why we've said it doesn't meet with the High Weald management plan and their objectives.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. Yes, remember, don't speak to me or to the speaker, speak to the microphone. Thank you, Jane. Just before I call the next speaker, I've just noticed that Councillor Maynard is online, who is the ward councillor, and he's got his hand up, so I'm just going to ask him why he's got his hand up. Councillor Maynard.
It's whenever you want me to speak, Chairman. I just wanted to alert you that I was in the meeting. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Maynard. Right, so the next speaker is Graham Fifield from GRF Planning, who's the agent for this application. Mr. Fifield.
Thank you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity of speaking to you today. The concerns of residents regarding development is recognised. Change is often not welcome. However, the fact remains that there is a serious shortage of housing, including much needed affordable housing in this country in general, and Rother is not immune from this. Your own document, the HELA, acknowledges that even if all the sites considered suitable and available were to be allocated in the new local plan, there would still be a shortfall of housing to meet the current targets. Although the HELA is not part of planning policy, the site at Cottage Lane is one that is being advanced as a potential allocation. The question, therefore, is where to locate these new dwellings that are needed. Over 80% of Rother is within the nationally designated landscape, so unless all new housing is provided in Bexhill or Rye, some will inevitably be within or modest extensions to villages in that landscape. National and local policies do not preclude housing development in such locations, but require it to be carefully controlled. The site is a Christmas tree plantation, and with regard to its contribution to the landscape, as the case officer referred to earlier, the East Sussex County Council landscape officer considered that it was not typical of the designated landscape and did not support any of the characteristics. By contrast, the point was made that a sensitive development could provide an opportunity to improve the landscape. Although only indicative at this stage, the layout that has been submitted with the application does demonstrate that the scheme reflects these comments. For example, the layout is informal, with car parking areas behind the front walls of the houses, so as not to be prominent, a circular turning area at the end of the cul-de-sac, is proposed rather than a harsher hammerhead, together with open space and additional planting. It is the case that the previous SLA ruled out a much larger area of land extending northwards into open countryside fronting Mill Lane as an allocation in the DASA. However, the current application site is approximately 1/3 of that much larger area and relates far better to the existing village and the existing development boundary. I've already referred to the benefits of providing affordable housing that arise from the development. In addition, the scheme will also contribute significant highway benefits, particularly for pedestrians. These include footpath improvements, improvements to the bus stop, and a pedestrian crossing on the A28. The site is within walking distance of the centre of the village. Whilst Cottage Lane is a shared surface for part of its length, this is not uncommon in villages. The Highway Authority have not identified any serious highway safety issues. They have also referred to the very low morning and evening peak traffic flows likely to arise from the development. Concern has also been expressed about Westfield becoming very urban if this development proceeds. However, there are approximately 1,100 households in the parish, and up to 20 dwellings represents only a 1.8% increase. Since the original application was submitted, the number of houses proposed has been reduced from 28 to a maximum of 20. This has resulted in a better layout, which I've already referred to. In addition, it addressed some concerns regarding the effect on residential amenity caused by the proximity of new properties shown on the original scheme. As policy requires, such amenities are not to be unreasonably harmed. Other benefits arising will be the provision of a minimum 10% increase in biodiversity, both on the site and adjacent to it, and elsewhere in the parish. Whilst this is not strictly required, given the date when the application was submitted, which predates BNG requirements, the applicant is keen to put such measures in place for the benefit of diversity. I strongly believe that the benefits arising from this scheme, including the provision of much-needed affordable housing, improvements to the highway network, and biodiversity, outweigh any concerns that have been expressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fifield. Any questions for Mr. Fifield, please? Councillor Field and then Councillor Mear.
Thank you. I was just wondering if I could have some clarification. You talked about footpath improvements. Do you mean footpath as in the technical sense of a public right-of-way, or in the sense in which it is often used wrongly for a pavement or a footway for pedestrians?
It's basically the improvements to the footpath that runs along the south side of the boundary which leads to the A28.
So it's public right-of-way?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mear.
Good morning, Mr. Fifield. I think from the way in which you addressed us, you're probably already aware of the amendment that there has been to Section 85 of the Countryside and Rights of Way Act 2000, and that was amended last year by the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act. And I'll just read those words out. And I think probably the way in which you've addressed us shows that you know the principle. We have to, as a relevant authority deciding this, we must seek to further the purpose of conserving and enhancing the natural beauty of the area of outstanding natural beauty. So we have to further the purpose, not just have regard to, but we actually have to further the purpose of conserving and enhancing the natural beauty of the area. Can you explain how your proposal will do that?
I think the point was made quite well in the East Sussex County Council Landscape Officer's comments that the site has previously existed, made virtually no contribution to that landscape. It was not typical of the A&B landscape, and that a well-designed scheme, landscape-led scheme, could in fact achieve an improvement to the national landscape, and that's what we hope we have achieved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Barnes. John Barnes.
You acknowledged, I think, sorry, good morning to you. You acknowledged, I think, in your presentation that developments really within the A&B need to be strictly controlled. I just wonder why you are insisting on an outline application, which means that we have to buy things about layout, design, entirely on trust. And I'd be interested also if you would say what steps you've taken to establish that this site would be viable with the affordable houses, that the number that you're promising.
To answer your first question, obviously an outline application is just that. And when a reserved matters application is submitted, the council has full control over all matters such as design, external appearance, massing, etc., etc. So it doesn't mean that if an outline permission is granted, that it automatically follows that a scheme that will harm the A&B will be approved. In fact, I would imagine the opposite would be the case. So there is still full control over all the matters such as design, appearance, landscaping, etc. With regard to your second point, all I can say to that is the applicant is perfectly willing to enter into the Section 106 obligation to secure the affordable housing.
Thank you, Mr. Fifield. Any other questions? I have got one following on from Councillor Barnes and that answer, which is, given the extra costs involved in all the Section 106 suggestions from highways, how sure are you that you'll be able to deliver the affordable housing? Because that's a lot of extra costs that are going on to this development.
At this stage, no detailed costing has been undertaken. But as I said, the applicant has no problem with entering into the legal agreement.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Thank you, Mr. Fifield. We now have Claire Baker on behalf of the applicant. Good morning.
Good morning.
No, don't worry. We don't cheat. Okay, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Claire Baker. I am the daughter-in-law of the applicant, Mr. Michael Baker. Our family has lived and farmed in Westfield for 7 generations, where they have grown and supplied their farm produce since 1905 and during the First and Second World Wars. This was to local towns and villages such as Bexhill and Hastings, and more recently this service continued to be offered by providing wholesale potatoes for Little Down Gardens during the COVID pandemic. The owners of this parcel of land are people born in Westfield and consist of Mr. Kevin Baker, a school teacher and lecturer, Mr. Michael Baker, a potato wholesaler, Mrs. Elizabeth Porter, who works in the NHS for the mental health services. We are not a faceless large developer. We are a local family sensitive to the community. Westfield desperately needs housing, particularly affordable housing for our children, and for those of us, like many of my colleagues, who work in the public services on modest salaries. Our village, whilst not a conservation zone, nor with many listed buildings, has a really wide range of services and facilities for its residents, and is the closest village to the Conquest and the large supermarkets. It is a thriving community which we are all very proud of. Our family has provided plots of land for housing over the years. Heathfields for 70 houses in the 1970s, 3 houses in Newcut and 20 in Stablefields. Some of the objectors to the application live in these developments. This is a modest development of 20 houses, which will bring much needed improvements to the village, like the pedestrian crossing across the dangerously fast A28, which the Parish Council has discussed the need for on numerous occasions but cannot afford. We understand that people don't like change, but this small development uses and enhances low quality land, brings biodiversity improvements, brings a much needed mix of housing as required by the parish and the district councillors. Thank you for listening today.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this speaker, please? No? Thank you very much. I will now ask Councillor Maynard, the ward councillor, who also called this in, to address the committee. Councillor Maynard.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman, and good morning. I think that within the village, as you know, I've been district councillor since 1999, and I've also lived in the village all my life, and quite clearly, whenever large developments come along, there's always a lot of debate within the local community. I would say this has probably been the one that has attracted the most debate, chiefly because of the concerns by local residents that it is not in the local plan. And when one talks about, obviously, what could happen in the future, we are somewhat, with this application, putting the cart before the horse, because it is very clear to me, and I should declare an interest, by the way, Chairman, as a member of East Sussex County Council, so that's a personal, not a prejudicial interest. I think that quite clearly County have made their representations. I'm not satisfied that all the comments of the county ecologists have been taken on board, but I think there is a wider issue here, both in terms of precedent and in terms of the effect on the OMB. Just because the land at the moment isn't in a particularly good state doesn't mean it can be enhanced without actually building out the area. I think we have to be very careful and reflect upon where Hastings sits within, where Westfield sits within, rather, on the border with Hastings. And in fact, there's been significant development in Westfield in recent years. In terms of the affordable housing, I think we can be very clear up front and honest about the fact that Westfield Down has in fact delivered most of the local need. And in fact, many councillors will be well aware, because it's in the local plan, that there's another fairly large site within Westfield Parish that will deliver additional affordable homes that is already within the local plan. I think that there are significant issues with this particular site in terms of accessibility. I am not convinced or satisfied by the comments made in regard of pedestrian access to the village. I think that there are significant negatives in terms of possible light pollution for those houses that front Cottage Lane opposite the site as cars enter and leave the site. I think that we have to be very clear, as I say, that this is not within the local plan. This is a speculative application, and who's to say that it wouldn't be included in a future local plan? But as things stand, this is development within the AONB. and as things stand, this should be refused. I think we've been very careful in the past. I remember so clearly, both in terms of the work that the parish council did when Westfield Down went into the last local plan, that there are incredible sensitivities within the village to make sure we protect the OMB. As things stand, as an outline application, I think Councillor Barnes is quite right. There are too many imponderables within this, and it is outside the development envelope of Westfield. And I'm very clear as local member in the representations that I've received that I'm not satisfied that the access to the village would be good. I'm not satisfied that road safety in Cottage Lane, which is already something that both the parish council and the county council have looked at in terms of enhancing pedestrian safety. I know that the applicants just refer to the A28. Well, Cottage Lane itself, it is in fact quite a dangerous road, and the clue is in the title. It is Cottage Lane, and that is the problem in terms of accessibility to the village. As things stand, therefore, I would urge the committee to turn this application down. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Maynard. Right, we now start on questions for the officer. Councillor Mary Barnes, and then Councillor Ganley.
Thank you very much. Edwin, one of the things that we haven't heard much about is what happened to the Christmas trees and what the Forestry Commission then said as a result of the trees being disposed of. From what I read on the report, it would look to me as if the Forestry Commission is going to take fairly punitive action, I suppose it could be said to be, and that for 10 years, if they have to replant, there would be Christmas trees still on that site. That's part one of my question about it. How were the trees disposed of? Was it bonfires and things? I mean, I'm just thinking of the pollution that went into the atmosphere. And why has there been no effort at all to continue the sale of potatoes? Potatoes actually enhance the soil. Any amateur gardener who's ever planted potatoes does it first to improve the soil quality. So why on earth has that not gone through all the tests that we would normally accord to any change of use? Why are we, it's all systems go housing. This cannot possibly be right. This is a rural area. That's an agricultural field. What effort have the authority made to make sure it can't continue as an agricultural site? But above all, how was the Christmas, it must have been quite a large Christmas tree site. How was it disposed of, and why?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm afraid I can't answer the question why the trees were removed and why the applicant has decided to put in an application for planning permission. That's entirely up to them to do that. In terms of the Forestry Commission investigation, I did set out, I think, in the committee update that I've been informed that a restocking notice has been served. And I don't know what the details of the restocking notice are because I haven't seen it. So the implications are, yes, that the trees may have to be replanted for a period of 10 years. But what I would point out, and what I've said in the committee report, is that that's a matter that's dealt with under separate legislation to planning. So we can still make a decision on the application, but the planning permission, if granted, wouldn't override requirements under separate legislation.
Can I come back on you? Then why are we making a decision that can't be implemented for 10 years?
Because we have to deal with a planning application and we have to make a decision on it.
Thank you. Councillor Gowling.
Thank you, Chairman. This application goes against several of our policies, most of which have been detailed by Jane Clark more capably than I can. I will point to one issue, one particular issue that concerns me. We have a duty to protect the AONB. We live in a very beautiful part of the country, and it's our job to make sure that as far as possible, no harm comes to it. In fact, paragraph 182 of the NPPF states, great weight should be given to conserving and enhancing, as Councillor Mayor has already pointed out, and enhancing landscape and scenic beauty in areas of outstanding natural beauty, which have the highest status of protection in relation to these issues. I do not understand how the report can tell us that it is not considered that the impact of the proposal would provide a clear reason for refusing the development proposed. That puzzles me because it's in direct contradiction to a decision by, what's his name, Planning Inspector J. Hobbs in an appeal concerning the Old Manor House in Broadoak, where he stated the council only has 2.79 years supply of deliverable housing. However, the harm to the HWNL, the AONB as we knew it, provides a clear reason for refusing the development. One of them is wrong, and with great respect, I suggest that the officer's report is wrong in this issue. Mr. Fifield would argue that this is not a particularly pretty bit of land. Well, that may be so, but paragraph 182 does not allow us to pick out bits of land which we don't like and say, well, it's not a very nice bit, so we'll build on it. Building 20 houses.
Is there a question? Sorry.
Yeah, well, I will. I'll come to it.
Quickly, please.
Building 20 houses does not conserve, much less enhance, the landscape and scenic beauty in areas of outstanding natural beauty. So why did the report state that it is not considered that the impact of the proposal on an area of particular importance at AONB would provide a clear reason for refusing the development proposed? The question is, why would you say that?
We've said that because we've got an opportunity here with the development that's proposed. It's in outline with access is the only matter that's for approval at this stage. But we've got the opportunity here to secure a really well-designed landscape-led scheme on the site that has regard to the Highfield design guides. And so we've got an opportunity to get a development that's in keeping with the AONB and Objective S2 of the Highfield Management Plan says that new development needs to reflect the intrinsic high-quality character and placemaking embedded with a true sense of place. And we could achieve this on this site. When the Reserve Matters application comes in, we can really secure a high-quality development for the site that's landscape-led. A high-quality design development that's landscape-led with lots of planting on the site, buffers, and so it would sort of fit in with the landscape. And just in terms of the general context of the site, it's immediately adjacent to the development boundary, and the development would be viewed in that context as a modest extension to that.
Chairman, so you consider that building 20 houses would conserve and enhance the landscape?
I think given the context of the existing site, which was used as a Christmas tree plantation, which isn't typical of the Highfield landscape, and given the proximity of existing residential developments, and the fact that this new development would be seen in that context, and the opportunity for us at Reserve Matters stage to scrutinise the design and layout of the scheme and the landscaping, that yes, we could secure a high-quality landscape-led development here, which would enhance the area.
Thank you. I thank you for your reply. I disagree totally with it, but I thank you for it.
Thank you. It's Councillor Field, then Councillor Stanger, then Councillor John Barnes. Councillor Field.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Maynard reminded me I should have declared I'm a member of East Sussex County Council, and furthermore, I sit on the Planning Committee, which is where unresolved objections to TROs end up. It's personal, it's not prejudicial.
Thank you. Councillor Stanger.
Yeah, just a question for officers. What difference would you see between this and the mentioned other site of Broadacre, as in Westfield and Broadacre?
The Broadacre site relates to a different settlement of Broadacre, and this is Westfield we're talking about. The Broadacre site is for development of a parcel of land that's to the south of the linear Udimore Road development. So it's actually separated and detached from that development, so it's almost in isolation of the development on Udimore Road. And at that time, or for that application, there were details of design and layout included in that scheme, and it was clearly an overdevelopment, or the density of development on the scheme was too much for the site, and they were unable to provide appropriate landscaping on the site. So, but that wouldn't be the case here. We've had the opportunity to secure an appropriate density of development on the site with landscaping included in it.
Yeah, the other thing about how does it viewed, you say at the edge of development boundary, so what is that viewed in the context of the planning inspectorate? How is that viewed on the edge? Do they take that in context of the development boundary, or just as a general rule, or is that the application by application?
It'll be case by case, but I mean, this site, members visited the site on Tuesday and would have seen the proximity of the site to the development in Cottage Lane, the Fernley Close just to the south, and then we had Mill Close up to the north as well. So you could see very much that it's immediately adjacent to existing developments. Moreover, Cottage Lane itself, and further down Cottage Lane, you can see that you've got how there's a mixture of houses. The pattern of development really is sort of houses that are set back and facing Cottage Lane, and then in amongst that you have cul-de-sacs development as well that sit behind those dwellings on the frontage. And really, this development would be viewed as I said before, a modest extension to that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor John Barnes, then Councillor Mia, then Councillor Mary Barnes. Councillor John Barnes.
Yes, I think we must explore a little more this concept of alongside.
Just into the microphone.
Speak into the microphone. Yep. I think we must explore a little more, Chairman, this concept of alongside the development boundary. By definition, there are going to be a great many sites alongside the development boundary. Indeed, at this moment, there is one in Burwash, in my ward, which has twice been turned down now on a planning application because it is outside the development boundary. I just wonder, and the word technically occurs in 1.2, I just wonder why you think this is only technically within the countryside, when in fact we have drawn a development boundary as recently as 2019.
Yeah, it is in the countryside. I can't say any more than that. So,
Councillor Mia.
Mr. Cork. Mr. Cork, I have to speak this way. I think you've, to some degree, already answered my question, but could we have the plan up again on the screen?
the one of the development boundary?
The one which I'm really asking a question about the surrounding developments.
Okay, let me just bring that. Bear with me. That one?
Yes. I was really. I wasn't able to go on the site visit on Tuesday, but I have been. I went yesterday and I had a good look around myself. Yes. Of course, it is in the countryside in the sense in which you explained it, outside the development boundary. But going further up Cottage Lane, there is a great deal of development, very well concealed, I have to say. But when you actually go there, there are a surprisingly large number of surrounding houses. And the question really is, I think you've probably answered it, you feel that this relates well to the existing developments, which are already substantial in that area.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, no, I just... it's Councillor Mary Barnes next. Then I've got Councillor Stanger, then you two.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Mary Barnes.
Just a few questions, Edwin, too, about the footpaths. I think it says that there's a footpath between Cottage Lane and the A28, but I couldn't actually see anywhere in the report as to how that's going to work. At one point, I think it was talking about 40 square metres or 40 yards of tarmac. And tarmac is horrible stuff to be putting down in an environmentally friendly village. But how do the footpaths link up? And can I also ask the question, because of the clerk mentioned one of those is going to go over land which is owned by the parish council. Can you explain that as well?
The 40-metre footpath, first of all, would be just outside the site entrance, and that would link up with the public footpath number 27.
Are we talking about the Cottage Lane entrance?
Sorry, yes, the Cottage Lane entrance to the site, the 40-metre footway is at the front of the site. I'll just see if I can get the cursor in play. So where the site entrance is, and it just runs slightly down to where basically the development boundary starts here. And you will remember that we walked up public footpath 27. It was just a mud path basically, and we had a look into the site at the site visit. Public footpath number 28 is just here, and we did walk along to footpath 28, and I believe Councillor Stanger had a walk up there just to see where that went. And this is the footpath that we are talking about being upgraded. Now, I've been told by the Highway Authority that is a possibility for that to be done, so I don't know any difference to that, I'm afraid. That's what I've been advised by the Highway Authority, and they've spoken to their Rights of Way team. So,
then ask about the top northeast corner of the site, which appears on the plan, which admittedly is only an indicative layout. There appears to be an opportunity to go from that top northeast corner further on into the site beyond it. Is that true? I mean, what would happen there if that was all extended? And are we looking at only phase one of a development?
okay, so the northeast parcel of land, which is outlined, you probably can just about see it's outlined in blue, that is one of the off-site parcels of land that would be secured for biodiversity net gain. So that would be secured under legal agreement, and that would have to be managed for one of the conditions says that would be managed for 30 years for BNG. So there wouldn't be scope for that to then be developed.
Thank you. Before I start on the repeats, I'm going to ask a question because you mentioned highways. I'm just going to say, because you used a word from the highways report, so I'm just going to say there is a question at the end of this. We have often commented about the lack of details we get from highways. On this one, we seem to have had an absolute avalanche. And I'm wondering from you if you think the highways have gone beyond their remit when their report says the proposal could not be refused on accessibility grounds. So they're doing our job for us, and you actually also repeated in your thing that it could not be restored on accessibility. I think the words should be there, but do you think they've overstepped their mark in this one, and that the sheer length of conditions that they want on 106 to make this even slightly sustainable seems a bit over the top, but have they exceeded their remit?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they've overstepped their remit. They're just saying what they think. The requirements they're asking for are essentially a footway outside the site, improvements to a public footpath, and improvements to bus stops, and also a pedestrian crossing. I don't think that's unreasonable. Members on site, we did walk in Cottage Lane. I personally didn't think it was highly trafficked, but members may take a different view. And I think we said it was maybe a 5-minute walk to the village centre, so it's not that far from the village centre from an accessibility point of view. Highways are comfortable. That's already been used as a shared service, and I don't think up to 20 dwellings would significantly result in sort of adverse highway impacts, pedestrian safety issues. And just to say, it is for up to 20 dwellings. It is not to say that it will be 20 dwellings. It would potentially be less than that, so there'd be less people on the development potentially.
Thank you. I've now got, there's 5 more, Councillor Stanger. Councillor Stanger.
Hello, yeah, this is still questions for the officer, isn't it, not debate. What weight should be given to the housing and economic land availability assessment that was done recently? I think it was last year, was it? Or what do you call it? You have an acronym for it, but the housing and economic land availability assessment. What weight should be given to that?
It's a background report, so it's not part of the development plan. It is a consideration, but it's the view of officers who've obviously drafted that. So it is for members to decide how much weight they want to give to that. It's not part of the development plan, as I said. So it's just a bit of background information.
And of course, that's not been accepted. It's just a document. Councillor John Barnes.
I think this question is probably more for our legal advisors than for Mr. Cork, Chairman. But I am interested in the way the report deals with the presumption in favour of sustainable development. And I have consulted more than once in previous months and years since the Monk Hill or Surrey Hills judgment was made in the Court of Appeal, which struck down, in my view, the presumption of sustainable development in the AONB. That doesn't mean that you don't have to strike a balance, but it is the tilted balance that the Appeal Court judgment dealt with. We appear now to be importing a new distinction. We're saying that the 2 sub-clauses of paragraph 11, the first one says if you can show that there is damage, then that is an absolute and you should turn it down. But we're then importing into 11D against, I would have thought, the natural meaning of the word, the notion that if it doesn't pass subsection A, then the presumption of tilted balance is brought back in to 11DB. Now, I would be interested to know why we are differing from the Surrey Hills judgment on that.
As if by magic. Kirsty.
So obviously, and I've got the section in front of me. So paragraph 11 talks about a presumption in favour of sustainable development, and the tilted balance, as it were, is initially triggered by the fact in 11D, where it talks about there being no relevant development plan policies, or the policies which are most important for determining the application are out of date. And then the footnote 8 talks about where the local planning authority can't demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. So initially the tilted balance is triggered. So that talks about granting planning permission unless, and that's where you go into D1 initially, the application of policies in this framework that provide areas or assets of particular importance provides a clear reason for refusing the development proposed. And then you have footnote 7 that talks about where there are where there's a clear reason for refusal due to the harm to the, in this case, the AONB. If, as I said, the officer has clearly set out in his report why, and obviously this is a matter of planning judgment in terms of the weight to be attached, that he didn't feel that there were sufficient reasons to refuse the application, and it's at that point that you then go on to consider subparagraph 2 of 11D, so only where the isn't a clear reason for refusable, you then, and because of 11D1, it disengages the tilted balance, and then 11D2,
sorry,
you're talking about.
Clear, Chairman,
sorry, let me finish. Sorry, 11D2, you're talking about where the adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in the framework taken as a whole. And that's when the tilted balance is then engaged in terms of assessing what the benefits and the negatives and the positives for the application are. So that's where you've got the two, and you what is say if one is triggered, you don't go on to 2. So if 11D1 is engaged, that there's no no grounds, clear reason for refusal, you don't go on to consider 2. It's only if there are no clear reasons for refusal in D1 that you then consider D2.
And if you look at the wording of 11D little b, it doesn't talk about the tilted balance, it talks about a balance. And that's I'm not quite clear why we are re-importing the notion of tilt at that stage. And as I read the Surrey Hills judgment, they said, no, the tilt doesn't apply within the AONB. That doesn't mean you don't have to strike a balance under 11D little b. But it's the notion of tilt that we've imported which worries me, and this is not the first time we've done it.
So you're talking about 11D or B, you referred to 11B, that refers to plan making as opposed to decision making. Do you mean 11D subparagraph 1 and 2?
Maybe we should discuss this outside the meeting, but I have to say, as I read 11D little b, it doesn't bring in words like significantly and demonstrably outweigh. It's about striking a normal balance.
I mean, in the Monkhill decision, the benefits were considered to be insufficient to outweigh the harm to the AONB in that case. So the harm to the AONB was considered to be a clear reason for refusal under 11D1. But say we can have a discussion about the case at another time if it would assist.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. I've just made a note here, we need a training session on MPPF 11 just for the whole session to get a common understanding. Councillor Maynard, I have seen your hand. I will get back to you eventually. Councillor Fields.
Thank you. Just a quick question, and I think it's probably for Kirsty. I've been in these meetings before and been told there's no such thing as precedence in planning. Therefore, are references to planning applications before or elsewhere relevant to what we're discussing?
Obviously, planning history is a material consideration, and that's been set out in the report. What do you mean in precedence in terms of appeal decisions?
No, I'm meaning members of the public have talked about what they consider to be similar applications, for example, Broad Oak, and the result of that application. But I've always been taught that we consider the papers on the table in front of us and that precedent isn't an issue. So therefore, are those considerations relevant? And if so, why aren't they discussed in detail in the report?
So obviously Edwin set out earlier in a response to a question, we consider each application on its merits, and the Broad Oak case, Broad Oak application was different in terms of the applications that is in front of you. So consider each one on its own merits.
Right, thank you. Yes, we need to be consistent, and it just seems to me of the old adage, doesn't it? 2 lawyers and at least 3 opinions. I'm still not awfully clear, but thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Gray and then Councillor Creaser. Councillor Gray.
Thank you. Just a quick question for Edwin. We know there's a huge shortage of housing, particularly affordable housing in Westfield. If this site is refused, are there other sites that are available in Westfield?
There was the Westfield Down development, which Councillor Maynard referred to earlier on. That's a 100% affordable housing development that's built. And then you have the Moorhurst site, which we had an application on for the care home. That's allocated for 40 houses, sheltered housing. And I think as part of that, affordable housing is required as well. So, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Creaser.
Thank you. As another rural councillor, because Rye is considered rural, we've had people trying to nibble bits out of the ANOB around the town, outside of a development boundary, as have other colleagues in that sort of area. And we are custodians of the natural beauty and all that stuff. My view is, if we're going to be asked to do something quite controversial like this, I want more detail. We can't just say, because, I mean, one of the things I've found, although I'm fairly new at this, is that the more detail you get, the more decent assessment you can come to. I find this, we're being asked to do something, these people could change their minds before they finished, and we could end up not doing the right thing. I'm very concerned about that. Lack of clarity.
Question.
The question is, why haven't we got the information that we need? I understand what Edwin's saying. Sorry, Mr. Cook. But at the end of the day, we can't make a firm decision. I know our firm decision at the moment is to come back and get the sort of definition of what these folks want. But it seems to be that the social housing element seems to be put there to it comes across as if it's just, let's do that. I am concerned, very, very concerned about this one.
Thank you. We're still questions for officers at the moment. I'll just ask Councillor Maynard if he's got a question for the officers. If not, and there's no more questions, we'll start the debate with Councillor Maynard, possibly. Have you got a question, Councillor?
I just want to raise 3 points of clarification. I do think I'm not here I'm not going to ask for another bite of the cherry, but it's just 3 points of clarification. Certainly, when the officers mentioned the other allocations in Westfield, he's forgotten the Woodland Way site, which is the other one I was referring to, which is a large development. It's also against the High Weald management plan, and furthermore, although we're told it's not a planning consideration, I believe a restocking notice has been served. And again, I don't think I'm being unfair in making those points. It's just simply points of clarification so that you can make a quality decision. Thank you.
No, thank you, Councillor Maynard. I detected there were no more questions, so that's a good a part as any to start with the debate. So thank you for that. Anyone got any observations now? It's open for debate. Councillor Barnes.
I think these are always very tricky because there is a strong case for knowing that we require housing. Whether or not we think the withdrawn government target of 733 houses a year was ever realistic, we all know that we're not even building up to our own target. So there is always a case in favour of development. And there's no doubt that 20 houses with a proper affordable component would be of benefit. But what worries me is the arguments that are being used to outweigh the harm to the Airbnb. And by definition, 20 houses with the associated parking and the other paraphernalia that goes along with development is bound to do substantial harm to the field in which it is built. And if it's in the Airbnb, that is by definition doing substantial harm to the Airbnb. What worries me is we're getting to something which I think is deeply undesirable, which is rather than actually having a proper development plan where we decide to add to certain of our settlements planned developments, we're getting a constant nibble at the edges of our villages. Sometimes, and I instanced Burwash just now, we turn those down flat, even though it's a single house, presumably because we think a single house isn't worth having. But then we get to saying, well, maybe, but then we turn it down again. And these are officer decisions. They're not ones that I have brought to the committee. And yet, at the same time, I can show you one of those in Etchingham. But at the same time, suddenly, we get to this more substantial development, by definition, therefore, doing more harm, and suddenly it becomes desirable. And it worries me because it throws the whole purpose of our local plan, which is to identify sustainable settlements, service centres, and to actually add properly designed, properly planned developments under control. I think this is premature. It's not that I necessarily think that it is wrong in principle that there should be development here, but I think we are not in a position to make that judgment. And certainly I wouldn't want to make that judgment without knowing a lot more about the detail, the design, how it blends into the area. I think what we see already on the other side of the road is the way that these sort of developments have gone on in the past. And they don't really fit in with Westfield, to be perfectly honest. They are a different set of designs all along, and we are going to add to that problem. So at a time when design is becoming much more important, when layout is also important, lighting, all of those kinds of things, I just worry. We've got a proper Regulation 18 consultation going on for our new local plan. This site has been volunteered for that. This is in the consultation process, but suddenly we are being asked to prejudge the consultation process. Not in detail, simply on access. And I have to say I have some doubts about the access, because to my mind, it is rather too close to the crest of the hill for there to be proper visibility for the traffic. I would have preferred the access, if it's going to be access to the site, to have been rather nearer the lower end, rather than opposite the house, opposite and the drive opposite. But that's because, as a driver, I know how important visibility is as you come over the crest of a hill. I would have wanted a chance to query our highways expert on the precise location of this access. But for all these reasons, I am really very hesitant about reaching any decision at all today. I'm minded, I must say, given all the uncertainties, if we have to take a decision other than this is premature, to go against. But at the moment, I would prefer to rule that this is premature and rule it out on those grounds.
Thank you. Councillor Field.
Yes, thank you. I do agree with Councillor Barnes to some extent. It is premature, and that partly is the issue with accepting outline applications for developments of this side. And I know Councillor Barnes has said in the past that Westfield needs housing, and I think we would probably all agree with that. But we are here, and I always understood that outline applications were really saying this site can accommodate this number of houses, whatever is detailed in the application. And the fact that we have misgivings, we're not sure the affordable is going to stay, we're not sure what the design is going to be, is not actually, in my view, a matter for this meeting, because we are being asked to determine whether the site can take the housing. All the rest is down to the detail, which I'd very much hope this committee was involved in.
Thank you. Councillor Mear.
A number of observations, really. Rather, on the one hand, this, and on the other hand, that. It's difficult. I completely take Councillor Barnes and Councillor Field's points about this not being in the local plan. We have a plan-led system, and then we have paragraph 11, which says that we have to go another way. And I find that very difficult to live with, but that is what we have in front of us. And we have to try to make the best of it, I think. But I really wish the rules were otherwise. I really do. I find it a very curious concept that a suburban housing estate can enhance the national landscape. I mean, there are all sorts of very good reasons we need to house people and so on, but to enhance the national landscape seems an extraordinary statement. But yet, at the same time, the policy and the legislation must be contemplating the fact that it can. So we have to consider that. We have a site which is rather degraded by the growing of Christmas trees, the cutting down of Christmas trees, and so on. I don't like that being used as a reason for saying that this is enhancing the national landscape, because there are ways of improving the landscape without housing. It's rather like letting a listed building fall into disrepair and then saying, oh, well, we can have UVPC windows because it's already gone. I don't think that is right. Against that, of course, we have the advice of the landscape architect that there would appear to be no harm to the national landscape from doing this. The full application point is a very good one. I would love to have seen this come forward as a full application, but unfortunately I think we have to decide on what is in front of us, and it is an outline. Again, it's an unsatisfactory feature of the planning system. I'm rather reassured by Mr. Cork when he says that the application for is up to 20 houses, and because I'm so familiar with permissions being given or in the local plan for about 30, and then you get the application for 40 or 50. So I think up to 20 is fine. The actual density seems to be perfectly acceptable, and at around that number, I think it's all very achievable. Of course, there is nothing to stop the applicant coming back tomorrow with an application for 40. There's nothing we can do about that. But we have to deal with what we've got in front of us, and I think the number of up to 20 is sufficiently flexible to allow a good design to go forward. Those are my observations. As you see, I haven't really made my mind up yet.
Thank you. Councillor Stanger, then Councillor Byrne.
Hello, thank you, Chair. I agree with a lot of the colleagues have said. It would have been better to see, especially as it's a kind of controversial and near to the OMB, more design and full plan, and would have given us more kind of comfort in ensuring that the OMB is protected national landscape. But over the balance, I do believe, as I walked along to the bus stop and I walked along the lane towards the village, it is quite a, not built up, but it's quite a residential area, and it would only add to this. Rather, it wouldn't be an isolated development within the countryside, in my opinion. I think the affordable is great, and hopefully it can be delivered if it goes ahead, and also the footpath and the bus access. So currently I'm sitting there, I'm minded to agree with the officers. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit confused as to which debate we're having. I believe we're being asked to approve this purely on access grounds currently, and yet we are not the arbiters of access. We've got a report from Highways saying it's okay by us with the enhancements to the footway and the footpath that we've talked about. So if we're not the arbiters of access, and Highways are, what's left for this committee to actually decide on? What we're talking about now is the type of development. So we're really debating: are we looking at this sort of development to be? Is there anything that could come forward after the outline application that would make the application acceptable? So, and we haven't got any of those details. So, just correct me if I'm wrong. At the moment, if we approve, we're saying we approve access, and all we're really doing is agreeing with county, and they're the people who own the decision. And yet, it doesn't preclude us at a later date from saying, even though the access is okay, this particular scheme that you've now brought forward with design, with layout, and with numbers is not to our liking. We want to refuse this. That seems to be the situation. I'm worried that we're being asked to take the first step, and that subsequent plans will be couched in terms of, well, you've already said access is all right, so surely at least one of these schemes is all right. It seems a softly. I hesitate to use the word devious, but I think it's a tactical approach that's seeking to achieve more by this application than really meets the eye. So are we really being asked to second guess Highways on this?
No. Thank you. It's Councillor Barnes and Councillor Ganley, but I'm just, because that's triggered a thought for me, and this might be a ridiculous thought, but it's very true. It's said about access, and yet Highways have added all this list of other things to make the site suitable, not the access suitable, but to make the site suitable. So I'm not quite sure where that fits in, because Highways have done all that list of other things that make the site acceptable, and they've not restricted their comments to the thing that we're saying today, which is the access. But that might be totally muddled thinking, and I'm quite prepared to be shot down by the officer.
We're considering access, but we're also considering the principle of residential development as well. So, is it in principle an acceptable location for residential development? And Highways have advised that it is, subject to meeting their requirements and for off-site works.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Barnes and Councillor Ganley. Councillor Barnes.
I think one of the problems with Highways is they never turn up to answer questions. I have quite serious doubts as a driver about the precise location of the access. But that I can't explore, because the officer isn't here to tell me whether he has considered the point, whether he had a contour map, whether he's visited the site. I have no assurance on any of those things. So my doubts about the access, which is the one point that we have, other than we're being asked to approve, in principle, a development outside the development boundary on the grounds that we have a land supply problem. If we didn't have a local plan already out at Regulation 18 consultation, I will feel a little happier about the timing of this. But we are in danger of preempting the very consultation process that we're currently undergoing. And we do so in the teeth of the view of the parish council, a considered view, a reasoned view. And I have to say that by definition, a development of this nature must do harm to the AONB. The question really is whether the benefits outweigh that harm. But we all know when you look at a development of this size that you have parked cars, probably these are 3 and 4 bedroom houses, no 2 bedroom houses. We're told at this moment that much was vouchsafed to us. That means 2 cars a house, almost certainly, in a rural area. So no details here about parking. That again affects the layout and the site. I know nothing about that. The impact of those cars on the landscape could be substantial. And then you get all the paraphernalia of a development. And I know, living in an isolated settlement in the countryside, that nevertheless, I create lighting problems at night. I do have paraphernalia. I actually have, at the moment, a swimming pool. That is not enhancing the AONB. Sorry, Chairman, I just do not think we know enough, and in principle, I don't think we should be taking a decision today. So I'm prepared to move refusal.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Ganley, Councillor Gray, and Councillor Stanger. Councillor Ganley.
I wanted to just point out that we're considering not just access, but more importantly, the principle of development. But Edwin has just done that, so I shall hold my peace.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. I take heart from the fact that by the time this comes back for the looking at, the houses are actually built here, we will have our new local plan, which has the principal green to the core. So I think at the moment, we're just looking at outline planning approval. And just to get this into perspective, I know we need to do our utmost to protect the national landscape, but I look at North Bexhill, and it's not national landscape, but it is beautiful countryside. We have lost miles of it. In my ward alone, we've lost we've had about 350 houses built on Walsham Farm with plans to build the same amount again. We are losing. There was a plan for 800 houses in Sidley. We are just losing. It's all falling, I'm afraid, on North Bexhill. And this is just 20 houses in Westfield, which is urgently needed. So I'm minded to approve this.
Thank you. Councillor Stanger.
Yeah, and I'm getting to that position now that I think with the outside buy-in at diversity net gain and the other measures, hopefully when the more detailed plans come forward in the future, I would like to move a motion to recommend the officer's motion.
The first mention of a motion was Councillor Barnes to refuse.
Oh, yeah.
But it wasn't put and it wasn't seconded.
Ollie's seconded.
So, So the motion has been put to accept the officer's recommendation, and that has been seconded by Councillor Gray. That was the very question I was discussing up here. Yeah, thank you. As I know you mentioned you were minded to put the motion against. Okay. And I should have then asked if anyone had seconded it rather than, as subsequently Councillor Gray jumped in on Councillor Stangers. So, one moment. Yeah, so I will take that as another learning lesson for me, that I should have asked if anyone was seconding Councillor Barnes's motion to refuse. So technically, as that was the first motion that was put, I will now ask if anyone wanted to second Councillor Barnes's motion to refuse. And that's Councillor Ganley. So, yeah, no, I'm just... Who thought today was going to be straightforward? So, what I will do, subject to the discussion going on behind my back in a moment, is to adjourn so that Councillor Barnes and Councillor Ganley can meet with officers and myself to discuss the reasons for the refusal, which will then get put to the committee for a vote. But I will just find out what the result of the discussion behind my back was. Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Yes, okay. So we will take the motion to refuse first. We will now adjourn for 15 minutes to allow for Councillors Ganley, Barnes and Creaser, who wanted to second it. You're welcome to join us in the Chairman's office next door to discuss the reasons for refusal that can be put to the membership for a vote. So we'll be back at 11:30. And can I just remind you not to speak about the application as it's still live, except obviously those people coming in the office with me. Thank you. Thank you. I must remember to say in future a break till sometime after, not the actual time. Right, so we are now coming to a motion to oppose the officer's recommendation, to refuse the application. The reasons being given are that the proposed residential development, by reason of its intrusion into the countryside of the High Weald National Landscape, outside of the development boundary, would cause substantial harm and irreversible damage to the landscape and scenic beauty of the High Weald National Landscape, contrary to paragraph 1H2 of the National Planning Policy Framework, and RDC policies OSS4, RA2, RA3 and EN1 of the core strategy, and policies DEN1 and DEN2 of the DASA.
Chairman, could I, by reason of its scale and intrusion into the land, because it
Right, I'll have another go. I'm sorry, I've got to say that again. So the reason is the proposed residential development, by reason of its scale and its intrusion into the countryside of the High Weald National Landscape outside of the development boundary, would cause substantial harm and irreversible damage to the landscape and scenic beauty of the High Weald National Landscape, contrary to paragraph 1H2 of the National Planning Policy Framework and policies OSS4, RA2, RA3 and EN1 of the core strategy, policies DEN1 and DEN2 of the DASA. All those in... Yes, Councillor.
Sorry, could I have some clarification, because I didn't really understand that, because the scale of the development, the application is for up to 20, so the scale of the development isn't defined in the application.
Beam me up, Scotty. Well, you were the seconder of the amendment. Would you like to just nod and a wink to Councillor Barnes and take scale out, possibly?
I think on balance, it's necessary to say that, because up to 20 is up to 20. It's not going to be in single figures, is it?
It could be, but we'll leave scale in. One moment. Right, so scale is in there. I'm not going to read it again unless anyone actually needs it read again. So all those in favour of rejecting the officer's recommendation and refusing the application for those reasons, please show. 4. Those against? That is lost. Therefore, we come to Councillor Stanger's... No, it was quite simple. Councillor Stanger's motion, seconded by Councillor Gray, to accept the officer's recommendation to grant outline planning permission, delegated subject to conditions and the completion of Section 102 agreement to secure provision of off-site highway works as required by East Sussex County Council Highway Authority, financial contributions as required by East Sussex County Council Highway Authority, affordable housing provision, custom self-build provision, and off-site land for biodiversity net gain. All those in favour, please show. Oh, one moment. Councillor Creaser.
You said section 102.
Did I say 102? I was just checking you were listening.
I do apologise.
Section, no, it is important. Section 106. Thank you. All those in favour, please show. All those against? That is carried. Thank you. So planning permission, therefore, is granted. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to stand down from the chair and let Councillor Stanger take over the rest of the meeting, and I think he's going to revert to the original agenda so that the people here for 16 Highton Close don't have to sit through another one. So thank you. Thank you for your contributions this morning.
Yeah, bear with me 1 minute. I'm just adjusting everything. 1 minute. We'll move on to now on the agenda, item 8, application RR 2023 627P, 16 Highton Close, Bexhill, erection of a new 2-storey chalet bungalow with access onto Collington Lane West and erection of extension to existing dwelling. And the officer presenting the application, which was deferred in an April meeting, will be Reuben Hayward. Over to Reuben.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Good morning, councillors. The application consists of a proposed new dwelling and an extension to an existing dwelling in Bexhill, which was considered by the Planning Committee at the meeting in April earlier this year. Members deferred a decision for officers to review the potential for an alternative access to the site with the applicants in order to alleviate potential impacts on the cottages opposite. Next slide. Oh, there we go. The applicants assessed the potential for a revised access to the west, as shown, but found that visibility would be impeded by boundary treatment to the west. The local highway authority, East Sussex County Council Highways, were reconsulted for a definitive view and raised an objection to the revised access, concluding that the visibility displayed to the west is obstructed by a neighbouring fence which falls outside the applicant's control and therefore cannot be secured by condition. As a result, the applicants wish for the application to be considered with the access as originally proposed at the April meeting, which did not raise an objection from the local highway authority, subject to conditions. At the April meeting, members also requested that a condition was added for electric vehicle charging, and this has now been included in the report under condition 18, which requires the installation of an EV charging point prior to occupation. Members also suggested that the removal of permitted development rights could be reviewed to restrict further development. If this is something that members still wish to include, a further condition could be added for the removal of Class A, E and F permitted development rights pertaining to extensions, outbuildings and hard surfacing. The application is therefore to be considered by members as previously submitted to the April committee with the additional condition for electric vehicle charging. Thank you.
Thank you, Reuben. As there is no public speaking this time, as it's a deferred application from April, we will move on to it'll be award members, but I don't know if Andrew Hayward is online, is he? No. And Councillor Drayson can't speak because he said he's predetermined. So there's no ward speakers either. So we'll move on to questions for the officers. Anyone question for the officers? Councillor Field.
Yes, thank you. We were all very concerned at the April meeting about the effect of headlights on the properties across the road, which is why it was deferred to discuss the question of access. And I don't understand, unless I've misheard you to say, that the question of access is outside the control of the applicant, because surely when their architects design the premises, they design where the access goes. So I really don't understand that comment.
Thank you. So I think what was being said there is that the revised access, the visibility displays that would be required, would have required the removal of a fence, which was in neighbouring ownership. So that was why that couldn't be secured in this case.
Councillor Mear.
Yes, a question for the officer. As I understand it, the gardens, the amenity space around the new dwelling and around the existing dwelling will not comply with Rother's policies on those amenity issues. Is that right?
Thank you. So the rear garden for the proposed dwelling would measure just over 9 metres in depth, but would have quite a substantial width. And the garden for the existing dwelling would have a side and sort of rear element, which would exceed 9 metres in width. So paragraph 4.71 of the DASA does state that in a limited number of cases, a rear garden of slightly less than 10 metres in depth may be accepted. And this is considered to be one of those cases.
I was looking to see where the side amenity space is on the new dwelling.
There's no side amenity space on the new dwelling. It's just the existing dwelling has got that little bit behind the proposed extension.
Thank you. And when you talk about removal of permitted development rights, you're talking about garden sheds and the like?
Yeah, so Class A ENF relates to extensions to the dwelling and outbuildings and also hard surfacing.
Thank you.
Tony Ganley was next, Councillor Ganley, but we've just got Councillor Andrew Hayward online, which is the ward member. Would you like to say something, Councillor Hayward?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just had a few points that I was running through, spoken with residents past. I just wanted to draw attention to some of the material considerations. Various things such as the overshadowing onto number 15. Also the narrow part of the lane where the proposed driveway is proposed to come out onto. I don't know whether anyone has seen behind the hedge, but the ground on the opposite side of the hedge slopes downhill. So if any vehicles were to exit the driveway, you'd get headlights shining into the property opposite.
Just to clarify there, Councillor Hayward, sorry.
Hello,
just to clarify, obviously the deferral was for the access, so can we just try and bring it towards the access? Thank you.
Yes, okay, that would be safety issues really with the 3 pathways that come out on the road. It's used by school children. Also, a number of blind residents use the road to get to and from places because they feel it's an area that's significantly quieter than the main roads. And I think we just felt that the narrow part of the lane didn't really feel like it could support a driveway. If something like this were to be put through, then similar properties might also consider driveways on the quiet lane. I believe that's everything I've got to say.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. On to Councillor Ganley. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. In April, we deferred a decision in order to review the potential for an alternative access to the plot. Specific concern was and a very serious concern, was the question of headlights of the development, proposed development, coming out of that proposed development and shining directly into the rooms of the cottage opposite. I can't find anywhere in the report which addresses this very important issue. Could you tell me where that's addressed? That problem is addressed in the report, please.
So we haven't addressed that specific concern directly, but the application was deferred to review the access being moved, which we did go back to the applicants to try and come to some solution, but we weren't able to, so that's why the application has come back as it is at the moment.
So we're left in the same position we were in April, and that is we do not like the idea of a car with headlights exiting from the proposed development and shining straight into the, I presume, living room or bedroom. I don't know what. It doesn't really matter which one. It's shining directly into the rooms of the cottage opposite. That is a problem for me, a major problem.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. We deferred this because we didn't like the exit, amongst other things, and looked at moving it slightly further up. Do I understand that Highways are now saying it's not safe to move it slightly further up? So what I'm really confused about, just by moving it a matter of feet, because it's not a big area, they think that's safe? I should say that I do know this lane very well. It's a lovely, quiet lane to cycle along to avoid the more busy roads. This is a very narrow bit of this lovely country lane. And so I can quite understand why we've got 48 letters of objection for this lane. So can you explain why it's safe a few feet further down?
Thank you, Chairman. I think what members deferred the application for was for consideration of an alternative access. But this access that is already being assessed by Highways was considered to be the most appropriate to allow safe ingress and egress out of the site. The alternative access that was considered to the west, Highways raised objection to it because of the location of the new access and the inability to be able to provide that visibility display to be able to see the sort of east and west of the road itself, and the fact that the neighbouring property to the west is not in the or the land within the west is not in the ownership of the applicant. So they cannot control or say no boundary wall or boundary treatment should be reduced or things like that. So there won't be that opportunity to be able to address the visibility issue if that was the given the fact that the land doesn't belong to the applicant. So that's why they came back to say that on the basis that they will not be able to control the boundary treatment along that boundary, the being opportunity to achieve a safe and ingress and egress out of the site with good visibility display will not be achievable. And that's the reason why they raised objection to it, to that new access.
Thank you, Kemi. Any further questions? We go Angela, Councillor Meir, thank you.
Yes. A question about the boundary treatment along the lane itself. I think I saw illustrations showing hedging. I'm trying to find that in the conditions. Do we actually have a condition that hedging will be planted along the front?
Thank you. So I believe there was a landscaping plan that was submitted as an amendment prior to the April meeting, and that included post and rail fencing across the front boundary with hedging planted as well.
Councillor Barnes. John.
If Reuben could turn to the landscaping plan, there seems to be quite an abnormal amount of hard standing. Am I right or wrong? And will that be permeable or not?
I understand it's grasscrete, is it?
Yeah, so I believe that's actually grasscrete or grass sown hard standing, so not hard standing as in tarmacking or impermeable surfacing.
Any more questions for the officer? No? Okay, thank you. Move on to the debate. So, who would like to open the debate? Councillor Ganley.
Well, I think we're left with the same problem we had in April, and that is, who wants headlights shining directly into one's bedroom? You might be up to all sorts of things in that bedroom, for all I know. I don't know if it's the bedroom or the lounge, but I wouldn't want headlights shining into my room. And I'm quite sure the people who live opposite don't want it either. I would move approval. Sorry, I wouldn't. Can I?
It's just to make that clear, Councillor Ganley, you're moving refusal.
Refusal.
Refusal. Do we have a second?
I second refusal.
And the ground for refusal, Councillor Ganley.
Say overdevelopment and impact on other residents.
So we have a seconder, Councillor Gray. And so we need to link that with a clear planning material policy. Do you need to adjourn or?
Can I?
Just pass you over to Development Manager, Kemi.
Sorry, I'm just trying to understand what you mean in terms of impact from headlight. We're talking about one dwelling. And you've got other houses sort of there with sort of massive front amenity spaces or front parking in there that would have equally the same impact. So we're talking a matter of maybe a few nights in the winter where it's dark quicker. And I'm trying to understand, to assign in terms of the level of impact or the level of harm that you are sort of pulling from this for the reason for refusal. I'm just trying to understand in that sense.
Well, I'm not in a position to know what the occupant of the proposed development, how often he or she would exit from the property. It could be once in a blue moon, it could be every night. I don't know if perhaps he might be working nights. I don't know. No one does.
Councillor Field, thank you.
Thank you. I do find this very difficult. I understood that there's a concept of amenity, which I find the definitions quite complicated to understand. But are we not talking here about detriment to the amenity of the neighbours?
Yes, we are, but what I'm trying to understand is, yes, in terms of the headlights, you're talking about light pollution. So into what degree of harm is that from a singular or two vehicles entering into that site would have that harmful impact on the living conditions of the people or residents opposite the site? I need to be able to have that substantial harm coming up from what you're saying.
Well, we're talking about a new development of a 4-bedroom property. In addition to the existing property, so that's 2 properties.
No, the access to the car park is on the back for the existing property, not to the front.
Okay, so it's a 4-bedroom property that is proposed. There could be more than one person exiting. Could be 2. With the 4-bedroom, are more likely to be 2 cars, and they could be exiting. Who knows? Quite regularly.
I think, I'm still struggling because, I have a 4-bedroom house and I have 1 car. So it doesn't sort of add up that because it's a 4-bedroom house, there will be more than one car coming in and out of the site. I'm just trying to demonstrate here the level of activity in terms of coming in and out of the site is significant enough to result in a light pollution that will be harmful to the living conditions of the residents living opposite the site. That is where I'm trying to tease out your concerns in terms of getting to that point. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Mear.
Yes, an observation.
Yeah, I've got Creasy, yeah.
An observation, Chair, in answer to some of what Kemi was saying. The lane at this point is very narrow. I've looked at it on Google Earth. I haven't been down it. The lane is very narrow at that point, and the cottages opposite are very close to the road on their side. So we are talking about the headlights being in very close proximity to the existing cottages opposite. And I think it is also having a detrimental effect, or could be said to be having a detrimental effect on the remaining rural aspect of that lane. It is an unfortunate degradation of the environment there.
Obviously, with the lane, highways haven't objected, so that means that we can't go down the highway route necessarily.
I wasn't going, Chair. I wasn't going down that route. I was talking about the nature of the lane, not highway safety, but the appearance and the tranquillity, or the sense of rural ambience.
Councillor Creaser.
This house, this proposed house, is right on a pinch point, and those two, I did go to the site, and those two little places across the way are considerably lower. So you're going to have more of an impact in terms of that, because where it is, they are very close to the road. Pretty much you fall out the front door, you'd be in the middle of the road. So the pinch point there, and then the greater activity of coming to and from. And of course, it's further along you go, which we all did, is that it widens out. So quite a lot of those great big houses going that way, they're a bit further back. So it's not such an impact, but it certainly would have an impact on the properties. It would have a detrimental effect on their amenities, I have to say, unless, of course, you're an exhibitionist. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor John Barnes.
I'm probably going to make myself very unpopular with colleagues. I've got every sympathy with what people are saying, because the location of the houses opposite is very close to the front boundary, and they will undoubtedly be affected. I was in favour of deferring. I have to say, though, I do not think you're going to win this one on inspection, on appeal. I just don't think the grounds are sufficiently substantial to say that you're going to have an unbearable effect on those two properties. I wish I didn't have to say that, but I think somebody's got to be realistic about this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Field.
Thank you. I will always, in these circumstances, ask myself, whose planning committee is this? Is it the councils, or is it the inspectors? And as the inspector is a whole bunch of people, not one we can identify, are we really right to be second-guessing what that organisation might say? We should be here judging this appeal on the merits or lack of merits as we see it today.
Thank you.
Yes, in reply to that, though, Chairman, it's if you're thought to be being unreasonable, I just would want to know from my colleagues what weight they are putting on amenity. When we're assuming 2 cars, I assume, and we're assuming that they will access mostly in the daylight. So we're talking about nighttime access, and at that stage, people will have curtains drawn. So I just don't see, I'm sorry, that this objection is sufficient. I'm not saying it's not true, I just don't think it's sufficient to bear the weight of a refusal.
Thank you. Anyone would like to add anything to the debate? So we have a proposer and a seconder to refuse. We haven't got any. We're going to need to adjourn to get a clear planning reason to refuse before it can be put to the vote. So you must not talk to anyone about the application while it's still live. We're going to go to... There we are. So if we say 10 minutes, just so it'd be Tony Ganley, Polly Gray, come together and find a substantial reason for refusal. Position of the vertical axis opposite the habitable windows of number 64 Collington Lane West would result in occupiers of that property experiencing unacceptable light pollution from the headlights of the vehicles leaving the site. This would unreasonably harm the amenities of the occupiers of that property, contrary to policy OSS 4 of the core strategy. We have a proposer.
You said the vehicle. I would say vehicles, plural.
Vehicular, he said.
Oh, vehicle.
Vehicular.
Sorry, I wasn't clear enough, Tony. Councillor Barnes.
Chairman, we've only dealt with the light issue. Are we not allowed to introduce any new thoughts on how we feel about the development?
I believe it was deferred for access and the light issue, trying to move the access, then it would have sorted the light issue. Maybe it was moved along, but the highways have said no because there's a fence on the neighbouring property that cannot be out of the applicant's control. So they can't insist on any conditions on that. So that's why they refused the second option.
So what we're looking at is a sort of box-ticking exercise, because I do accept what Kemi is saying. It's quite right, you know. But how can we not look at overdevelopment of the sites? The fact that, you know, it is... Yeah.
At the last meeting, yeah.
I mean, I don't think we actually are that keen on the idea of that. Well, I certainly am not at all keen on the idea of seeing that building put there. It is totally out of character for the lane. And I would love to look for a reason that would stick. And I do accept that Kemi's explanation is that it's not going to stick if it comes to an appeal. But if we could introduce what we didn't possibly go into last time, which was a long conversation about how we felt about that building and whether it should be there.
I'll seek advice.
I think if members remember, I did ask the question before it was deferred last time, if that was the only reason you wanted it deferred on. And that was the only reason I was given, was to consider an alternative access to the site. I did ask the question because I did say that if it came back, would members make a different decision? So if you wanted to refuse it in the last meeting, then you had the opportunity to do so with other reasons with it. Now we've gone back to the applicant to just consider access only. I think it would be highly unreasonable to refuse it or add additional grounds to refusal because, or even consider the, I mean, it is down to members, but it would be unreasonable.
Thank you. So, are we ready to move to a vote on the table, or do you want some more debate on any of this? Next, we move the motion. I've read out the motion, and we have a proposer, Tony Ganley, Councillor Ganley, and a seconder, Councillor Polly Gray. All those in favour? A refusal, sorry. This is for refusal based on the reasons I read a minute ago to do with light pollution and amenities. So, all those in favour of refusal? All those against? One against, and I'm abstaining. So that was. Just to be clear for the people online, it's 8 for refusal, 1 against and 2 abstained. Thank you. So that is refused. And we go on to now next application, which is. I'll give you a chance to leave the room if anyone would like to. So we're on to the next one, which is the Bigwood London Road Battle. Councillor Field.
Thank you. Now then, Chair, I know you're chairing this meeting, but I've got a plan. I declared an interest which I don't think I actually have and said I would speak as a ward member. Long discussions with our solicitor here have highlighted the fact that our constitution doesn't actually let me do that and probably needs looking at again. So what I propose to do is have my say now before anyone's heard anything from any officers or anybody, say what I came to say, which wasn't much, and then go, safe in the knowledge that I know my presence here will not influence any of you. Right.
This is your wish and your rights.
Right. So, what I would say is that this is a development in the AONB. It's kind of a rare breed cattle breeding centre with a barn, and what they're proposing to add on to it in the AONB is a bit of incremental development in the form of a wet room. I can understand why, if you're there because there's no house, you might want a lavatory. I don't think a wet room is pertinent to a farming enterprise. I would therefore hope that it wouldn't be granted, but I can quite see. Make up your own mind, and now I'm going to.
Thank you, Councillor Fields. Wait a few minutes for Councillor Fields to leave the chamber and we'll continue. There we are. So moving on to the application, which is RR 2023-2606P, land at Bigwood, London Road, Battle. A demolition of existing barns and construction of a replacement barn as an alternative planning application, track and hard standing as existing. This is recommended to be resolved to grant full planning permission, and the officer is Michael Vanderloo. Thank you. Hand you over.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. This application relates to an agricultural holding located on the eastern side of London Road Battle, as can be seen on the site location plan and Google Earth imagery. Some members may be familiar with the site, as in June 2023, members granted approval for the erection of a barn at the site, which measured 30 metres in length by 15 metres, with a ridge height of 5.5 metres, as seen on the next slide. Members determined that the barn was reasonably necessary for the purpose of agriculture within the unit and found that the barn would not harm the High Weald National Landscape nor the amenities of neighbouring properties, and as such, planning permission was granted subject to conditions. This application before members is similar to that previously approved and seeks permission for the erection of a barn, which would measure 30 metres in length by 15 metres in width, with a ridge height of 5.5 metres. The main difference between the two schemes is that this current proposal intends to erect a small lean-to extension on the northeastern corner of the barn, which would be used, as the plan state, a welfare area and would contain a wet room, toilet and rest area. During the course of the application, the scale of the lean-to has been amended. Initially, the lean-to measured 7.6 metres by 9 metres. If you go back a couple of slides, already. So that's as was submitted, and that measured 7.6 by 9 metres. However, this was considered to be excessive when compared to the scale of the holding, and as such, it was subsequently reduced in scale to measure 7.6 metres by 5 metres, as you can see in the next two plans, with a ridge height of 3.6 metres, which represents a 44% decrease in floor area, as what was originally proposed. It is noted, and as Councillor Field mentioned, there is no dwelling on site, and no alternative currently on site to accommodate any or all of the elements, and so a lean-to structure attached to the barn to provide a washing and respite facilities are considered to be reasonably necessary on this holding, and it is not uncommon for these elements to be provided on agricultural units. Furthermore, the size, scale, location of the barn has already been accepted under the previous application, as has the existing hard standing. The additional lean-to, as proposed in this application, is similar in footprint to the existing detached structure it would replace and would be seen as a coherent addition to the barn. The proposal would be of a scale and design appropriate for its use and location, and as such it would have a similar landscape impact to what currently exists and what was previously given approval by members. Given this, the proposal should not detract from the character or the appearance of the locality or the landscape and scenic beauty of the national landscape. It is also not considered that the proposal would harm the amenities of neighbouring properties due to the distance between the barn and neighbours. Overall, the proposed replacement barn and additional lean-to extension is considered of an acceptable scale and design for its agricultural purpose. The proposal does not unreasonably harm the amenities of neighbouring properties and would have an acceptable impact on the character and appearance of the locality within the High Weald National Landscape. As such, the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions.
Thank you, Michael. We have Councillor Field, who's one of the ward members, not here. We have no public speakers, and the other ward member, Sue Burton, is also not here, I don't believe. No, that's fine. So, any questions for the officers? No. So, into the debate, and anything anyone would like to add or move? So, Councillor Creaser first, please.
This is a question, actually. Having had barn stuff, we have a loo inside our barn. Why does this one have to be separate outside? I don't understand that. Why do they need an amenity room if it's agricultural? Because they're all indoors doing stuff. So, translate that into English or whatever, or planning speak, but having had that kind of activity myself, I don't see why they want to keep upgrading it.
Well, they have permission for a barn already.
Well, exactly. I've got the barn. They haven't built it yet. They can just put a toilet inside, like everybody else does. Weird.
Question for the officer.
To be honest with you, I don't know. I would like to know. The question I would like to know is why it's got to be outside and an addition. And he won't know that. Exactly.
So the provision is actually in the form of an extension, as you can see on the floor plans. So it would be attached to the barn, and there is an opening to the barn. I believe it's in the form of an extension, not internally, as the majority of the internal of the barn will be used as pens. Therefore, a separate extension has been proposed in this case. But yeah, it forms part of the barn. It's not a separate detached outbuilding. It's an extension with an opening to go into the barn.
Councillor John Barnes.
Yes, I think we looked at this in some detail, and the case surely is made in 744. This is in some measure a replacement for an existing building. The officer has negotiated a reduction in the size, which I think is appropriate. The most troubling thing about this, to my mind, but given modern cloisters are not that obtrusive on the landscape, it is the introduction of the septic tank, and that clearly is an important condition to put in. I may have my suspicions, but at the end of the day, we can only go on what is here, and we have put a very, very firm condition 4 in, which is agricultural uses only. In other words, any change of use would have to come back to us. So I think with those safeguards, we really can't see this as anything other than a quite reasonable change to the existing planning permission. I have my doubts, but I think on the balance and with the conditions, we ought to support this.
Thank you. Councillor Mary Barnes.
Well, actually, I continue in the same vein, really, because I do remember this as well. It's a very small site. It's only 9 acres. And I think that they are breeding and selling unusual, rare breeds. But at the end of the day, that's what they're doing, and they're hoping to expand the business. So I hear what the one letter of objection says, which is, it might be all right, but it might not be all right. I do have my doubts. I also don't quite understand why they do need this. I mean, is rearing 16 animals so necessary to have a wet room? I really don't know. I'm not sure.
Thank you. Anyone else who'd like to add anything to the debate? No.
Say that I can well see the need for a wet room. If you've been up to your ears in what's it called? Manure. Then you want a shower, and in a wet room is ideal for it. Yeah, I fully agree. I really feel strongly that these little agricultural businesses need our support, and we should be falling all over ourselves to help them. That is not to say we do not apply planning rules and policies and regulations, but nevertheless, that is my feeling about agricultural development.
Councillor Andrew Muir.
Move approval.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor John Barnes. Any more debate, or are we going to move to the vote? Let's move. So the vote is to accept recommendations by the officer. Proposal, Councillor Andrew Muir, seconder, Councillor John Barnes. All those in favour? All those against? And abstentions? 1. 9.
How many for?
So that is 9 for and 1 abstention, no against. Thank you. Item 10 of the agenda, to note the time and the date of future site inspections is Tuesday the 16th of July at 9:30, departing the Town Hall. Thank you very much. We are now concluded this month's planning meeting. Bye-bye.